Hey, Taylor Hill.
Hey, sir, how are you?
I'm good, doing well. Good to see you.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, good to see you. Oh, Siri just answered you. Did you hear that?
Siri's fine too, I hear.
Siri's
Yeah,
fine too. Yes, Siri is fine. I guess that means I need to put my do not disturb on. Yeah, there you go. So Siri won't bother me.
that's funny.
So, how are you liking this little touch of fall?
Touch of fall. It's
Yeah,
90 degrees today.
I know, but man, there's no humidity. It's
Oh, yeah, the
great out.
humidity is nice.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's great. I've been out playing with the dogs all morning. Well, not all morning, but three times this morning because they're loving it.
It is starting to feel like fall might be just around the corner.
Yeah.
First day of September, it always feels like that to me.
Okay, so I have to ask you, when you realized that today was the first day of September, what did you think?
Oh, the same thing I think every time at the beginning of a month. What just happened to August?
That's what I thought too. It's like, gosh, that went by fast.
Yeah. Already? What?
It's gone. It's gone. Well, one of the things that I'm going to say, we're going to talk about alt text, what it is and why it's important today. But one of the things that I do want to get into a little bit is why in the world are we covering some of these technical aspects of search engine optimization? And, the truth is, what I see and what I hear from our clients, and I talk to other people that have agencies. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what end. It can be chimney HVAC, restaurants. It doesn't matter. And the question always is I don't know what you do for us. I mean, why does it? Why do I'm paying this money, but I don't know what you do. And so I really want to take off the blindfold, if you will, and say, look, guys, here are some of the things we don't ever talk about. We don't ever get into. We hardly ever, mention them because they're just all this technical stuff underneath the hood. But you need to know how important it is and why it's there. I mean, it's not there just so give us something to do. You know what I mean? There's purpose to it. And so I'm really trying to create a way that people can understand the purpose behind having someone or doing it yourself. Either way, I don't care which way you do it. I just know it needs to be done, and really talk about some of those things that we don't talk about a lot. So the next few weeks we're going to do that, and so we're going to talk about alt text this week, and so I'm going to ask you the questions because here's what I know. Uh, when we talk about alt text, it's technical, and you are way more technical than me.
Well, yeah, we're definitely going to get into some of the technical, but I promise to make it relevant and unpack it in a way that isn't difficult to understand. But before we get into the technical, I want to get into the historical.
Sure.
Alt text, the story behind it is interesting. So, really quickly, what alt text is alternative text that describes something visual, specifically images, on a page. So here's the history lesson. Back in the beginning with the internet, this was late 80s, early 90s.
Mm-hmm.
It was all about email, and it was all about sending messages to other people, finding documents online that were not just primarily text, but almost exclusively text. Downloading an image could take minutes.
Forever.
And people just on a dial-up modem that was 12k or 1k baud. I mean,
Hold on. Let me see if I can still do it. Oh, just
it's
for
pretty
those
good.
that were around back then.
Yeah, a very nostalgic sound for those of us that remember. But it took forever to download an image, and so uh, alt text was when the standard for images on a page first came about in the HTML. When they were writing the documentation for HTML, they realized that because images took a while to load, and not everybody had browsers that were even capable of displaying them at this point. So they needed a way to describe that there was an image in a document without being able to display the document. And so the alternative text was the way to do that. And it became a specification for images. And it was a place to be able to describe what the image was, whatever it was in the document. So that's kind of the history lesson for it. As soon as they, just to unpack it a little bit more, as soon as the alt text standard was implemented in HTML officially, then immediately the companies that were developing screen readers at the time for people who were sight impaired, they began using the alt text as a way to describe images to people who couldn't see the images. So as images became more and more prevalent and prominent on pages, now we think of the web as almost a visual only kind of environment. I mean, it's just, text is on some sites is secondary to the images. But, for those who don't have the ability to see those images, that alt text is very important, and it shows up there. When I say it shows up, not visually, but it is read by these screen readers, and the screen readers then are able to announce to someone what that image is. Image depicting plumber under a sink tightening U bend, or whatever that's called, trap. And so the ability to be able to describe in words what those images are is really what alt text is all about. Now, the SEO community jumped on it because, hey, this is one more place we can put words, right, that describe other things. It's good meta information, and it can help, game the system and get an SEO advantage. And it did for a long time, but even Google is coming out and saying, we'll talk about this a little bit more, I'm sure, unpack it. But Google is even saying, it's really not the place for it. That's not where you
do that.
Yeah, you're gaming the system. You really need to use alt text, not to stuff it with keywords, but to describe what the image really is.
Well, that's going to get us right into this next deal. So when you're looking at a website and where you're kind of going through the images and the videos, and by the way, alt text can be used on videos as well. When you're going through that, how do you know which is your alt text? Where is your alt text? How is it that you can actually find the alt text so that you know what you're dealing with?
Yeah, well, so there's two places that you're likely to encounter alt text. And the first is when you're creating the page using, whatever software it is that you're creating the page with. If it gives you the ability to upload an image and put it on the page, or put it in a little widget or a module that goes on the page. Most of them today, I haven't encountered any that don't do this anymore, but they almost all have a place now where there's usually a little text box next to the image when you upload it that says alt text. And you have a chance then to type into that box to describe the image, what the image is about. It'll also have a place for title text, and we'll talk about that here in a little bit and contrast what the differences in those two are. But you almost always have a place to put it in. So that's one way. If you control the website and you want to be able to see what your alt text is, then going into the back-end management admin part of your website and pulling up the image and seeing what the alt text is in the box provided is probably the easiest way to do it. Now, if you don't control the website, you're simply on some public website and you want to know what the alt text is, and not too many there's not too many times where you're ever going to really want to do that if you can see the images on your browser. But there are times where, and I should mention this too, there are times when, because of an internet connection or something, or a broken link to an image, the image isn't showing on a page, the alt text will display instead of the image. So if there's no image to display because the link is broken and your browser just can't find an image to put there, it can still see what that alt text is and show you in the box where the image should be what that image was supposed to be, right? If you've used your alt text well, it'll describe what that image should have been, which can be really helpful, especially if it's if you're in a document where you're trying to illustrate a point that the text is describing. Then that alt text can help describe the fact that right here there should be an image of an illustration or a diagram demonstrating the technical part of what we're talking about when we talk about a chimney liner or a chimney system, or whatever it may be. So,
well, and that's interesting too, because one of the things that I've been in quite a few webinars over the last probably month, because there's some things coming down the pike really changing. We're having to stay on top of, and one of them actually involves alt text. But one of the things that they're talking about is in the description of the alt text, that it doesn't have to be a dissertation.
Yeah.
That that you really need. So for those that are going, oh my God, I got all these pictures and videos and stuff on my site. You're telling me I got to go do this alt text thing. What am I going to write? Well, 2 or 3 descriptive sentences should be enough. I mean, you don't have to write, well, I sat down with so-and-so and we did a video and we talked about this and then we talked about that. You just want to hit the high points. Probably it's a video. You're probably talking more about maybe a paragraph. But if it's an image, 2 to 3 sentences should suffice. So I just want to make sure I put out that. So,
and usually it can be even less than that. It can be 4 or 5 words if the image is simple to understand.
I'm like, what? It's a PTrap. It's a PTrap. That's what you were trying to say.
That's what I was trying to describe.
Yeah. Thank you, Facebook user.
Yeah, I knew it was
I was like
a trap, but it's sort of U-shaped, but you're right, it's more of a P. So
yeah. So I just, that was funny because I was looking at it going, is this a spam or is that something I'm supposed to know? And then it hit me. It's a PTrap. All right, there you go. We're not plumbers, we're marketers. Just
right.
People know.
Dozens of people listening are going,
yeah.
Oh God, finally somebody corrected him.
Yeah, exactly. I loved it when you said dozens of people.
Well, yeah.
One of these days it'll be hundreds and then thousands and then millions. Yeah. Okay. Getting above myself now. So tell me a little bit, are there reasons beyond just the accessibility factor as to why the alt text matters?
Well, there's quickly becoming some legal reasons to do it because of accessibility. This might be a good time to talk a little bit about the ADA compliance that now people with websites, businesses with websites need to really take seriously. So really quickly, ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act, if you operate a website or a business in the United States, if you have a place of business that people come, then you have certain standards that you have to make that location accessible for people who are in wheelchairs, can't walk steps, various things. There's certain rules that you have to follow. If you don't follow those rules, you're subject to penalties and fines. And it's pretty, this has been around for decades now. Well, guess what? It's starting to show up on websites too. So the law is, I would say, I've been saying that the law is fairly untested, but there have been a number of lawsuits lately that have really done a good job of testing the law to see what the ADA language about accessibility really means for websites. So accessibility for websites means that somebody who is sight or hearing impaired can still use your website even with that impairment. So you can't simply design a website anymore just for hearing and sight normative people. You also have to think about those who are disabled as well and give them the opportunity to access your site fairly, or to do so with the abilities that they have. So it basically means that people are looking for websites that are not ADA compliant. In other words, they've bought a screen reader, which is the kind of software that someone who's sight disabled uses to access a website. And they'll take that and they'll go to your website and they'll see, can I access this website? Does it make sense? If I can't see the screen, does the screen reader give me the ability to understand it? And there's certain technologies that are completely impregnable by screen readers. Screen readers don't have a clue what to do with it. That's one of the reasons that Flash, you remember the old Flash players and
Mhm.
messages that used to pop up and say, your Flash is out of date, click here to update it and whatever. Well, it's one of the reasons that modern browsers have moved away from supporting Flash, is because Flash is not
Mhm.
friendly to screen readers. Screen readers have no way of understanding what's in a Flash part of a website. That code just doesn't exist to sight impaired people. So um, one of the things that the law now is showing is that these lawsuits that are coming about are resulting in some pretty heavy fines. Alt text is one of those parts of accessibility that really does matter. Now, it's certainly not the only part, and it's a very comprehensive subject, probably best treated, as a separate discussion on one of these Spark Lives. But just know that alt text is one of the factors that the law is looking at to say, are you following all of the best practices for coding a website in a way that makes it accessible to those who are sight or hearing impaired? And if alt text is not used well, I mean, if it's not used at all, that's a strike against you. And in the court of law, it's going to be one of the things that the other side is going to bring up and say, see, they're not paying attention to ADA guidelines at all when it comes to the way that they've designed and supported their website.
Yeah, and it's really interesting too because when you describe what's in a photo or a video, that also gives Google a lot more description of what's in there, because they still, even though they're getting better at recognizing images and videos, they're still not 100% on translation on that. So they still use alt text to a certain degree. Um, which brings me to another issue that I just heard like 2 weeks ago. Um, that there are people who are really high in SEO circles that are starting to believe that ADA compliance is going to be a trigger at some point in the future for search. So it's going to be almost just like securing your website. They gave you some warning there, so you better secure your website. The speed stuff that's come down the pike, that's another one. We just had a bunch of stuff on content that if you're writing your website just to game the system, a lot of those websites have been dinged literally in the last couple of weeks. So, this is another one coming down the pike. They tell you these things and tell you and tell you and tell you. Then pretty soon one day, boop, there it is, and they roll it out, and you're either ready or not. So to me, that's another really good reason so that we stay on top of those things, because the worst thing in the world you can do is pay a lot of money out to make sure your website, your SEO, and all that's done, and then something like this come out, and all of a sudden you're gone because there went your traffic, and literally it's 50 to 75% of your traffic online. So that's a big deal. That's a big deal. And if they use it to also rank in maps and say, yeah, we're not gonna show you in maps if you're not compliant on your website. And there's been people that have thought that Google's going to do that at some point too. They haven't yet,
Yeah,
but who knows?
yeah, we're seeing signs, but
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's Google wants to provide the best possible experience to all visitors, and they want to deal with companies that take seriously their online, the face of their business online. And so when websites are built in shoddy ways, and they've certainly looked at other kinds of conditions with regard to the way things are coded, the way things that are hosted, and things like that. The ones that cut corners generally have not failed. They've not been favored, and they've not fared well uh, as far as Google's continually updating its policies and its standard of what it thinks a good website really is. And ADA compliance is absolutely going to be the next frontier.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. So Chuck says, thanks guys for being proactive covering our sixes. If caught, I doubt they will be forgiving when awarding the fine. And that's really true. They don't normally care. They just give you the fine.
Yeah, I mean, there's some we initially 3 years ago, 3 or 4 years ago, when we first started seeing these lawsuits come about, they were really focused on large corporations that had government contracts, and because of those government contracts, because governments are ultimately the first to be responsible for ADA compliance on their websites, on government websites. And so all of their contractors were being required to as well. And so the first lawsuits were being brought against those that had government contracts. But then we started seeing larger brands get targeted. They were going after the ones with the deep pockets, right?
Yeah.
That's the deep pocket theory. That's the way lawsuits generally run.
Yeah.
But that trickle down has now reached the point that we're starting to see it with home services businesses. And not even the largest home service businesses in a market. We're starting to see it with the mom and pops as well. So this is real. It's time to take care of things.
Yeah, and it is time. So this is something a lot of people get mixed up because there's a title tag there as well on the image. So, and I'll be honest with you, back in the old days, we just took the title tag and stuck it in the alt tag. I mean, that's what we did. I mean, it's what everybody was doing.
Yeah. No, right? I mean, from an SEO standpoint, it was
that's what you did. And you'll do that anymore, but that's what you did then. So talk a little bit about the difference between what the title tag is and the alt tag. I mean, you've covered the alt tags as the description. So tell me a little bit about what the title tag should be.
Yeah. So the alt tag never really shows up on a website unless the image is missing. It shows up for sight and hearing impaired people that are using screen readers to understand the visual aspect of a website that can't be seen. But the title tag does show up. So when you hover over an image and hover over it long enough, the browser will pop up what the title tag is. If there's a title tag there for that image, it'll actually pop up what that title tag says. So it can serve almost like a caption, although a caption is a whole different HTML standard, and we could talk about that as well. But the title tag is really meant to be more for SEO. It's a way of titling that image and tying it to the content of the page. The alt text is really meant to describe what the image is, not how it connects with everything else, but what the image is, right? So I'll give you some examples. You have an image of a senior couple sitting at the table filling out insurance forms. And this is on a page that's all about Medicare and how confusing it can be, and why you need to call us so that we can help you sort out all your Medicare Part B stuff, right? So the image is there to sort of highlight that fact. Anybody who's reading the article and looks at that image knows intuitively how it connects to that feeling of frustration that you have when you're dealing with Medicare insurance. And so the title tag, when somebody hovers over it, might say something like Allstate Insurance, Nashville, call today, don't be like this couple, don't face the pain that this couple is experiencing, call us, right? So it could be something like that. Yeah. It connects the image to the text. It connects the image to the business that wrote the page. But alt text really is about describing the image itself. So good alt text might be elderly couple sitting at the table, looking over Medicare forms and being confused or feeling confused, where confused looks on their faces, right? It's literally, think about when you are watching a movie with the subtitles on, right? The closed captioning on. That's exactly what you're getting here with the alt text. It's describing what's going on, right? You've seen in the closed captioning, music plays in the background, loud sound of glass breaking in the distance or whatever, right? So those descriptives that are there for people who can't hear the action and the things that are going on in the audio of the video, They need those cues. So that's really what the alt text is for, is a way of giving cues about what that image is on the page for people who can't see it.
That's perfect. Perfect. So here's the big one. How do I know if I got good alt text?
Well, that's a great question. Because there's not a whole lot of good information online for how to write good alt text. So how do you know if it's good?
It's kind of subjective, don't you think?
Yeah, and good coverage too. That's something else. Your website, you may have done one or two images really well on your homepage, but you may not have treated all of your images throughout your whole website with good alt text. To be honest, one of the easiest ways to do it is to get a good screen reader program, and there's several out there, and some of them are quite expensive, but I think there are a few that are open source. To get one and literally without looking at your site, use the screen reader program to see if you can digest and understand what it is that page wants you to do, what it is that page is about, and whether or not it describes the images effectively on the page. And see. I mean, that's one way, just the most practical way I know. But doing a full audit of your website. I mean, this is something that we do. This is something that we do for our client websites. We audit to make sure that that all of those meta parts of the website that aren't always visible and aren't always thought about are well defined and used appropriately.
Yeah, and I was just thinking about this too. You know, when you have a website and you're constantly, which Google wants you to constantly work on it and move things about and get new links and prune the old links and make sure you got nothing broken and all that stuff. But they also want you to put new pictures on, put pictures of your team. They're constantly saying, yep, video is great, images are great. And so when you're doing a website, if you get in a hurry and you skip some of those some of those steps, you may have a picture that you've gone through all your alt text with and everything's great, but in the haste, somebody put a picture on and forgot to do the alt text or put the title in or whatever. If nobody ever audits your website, you don't catch it. So
out of sight, out of mind.
Out of sight, out of mind. And as much as we have things in place and all that, every time we do audits, I'm always like, wow, we missed that. Okay, then we need to get better. We need to change the SOP or go in. It's no different than any other business, but you do have to actively be doing it, because you can't just let it sit. If you let it sit and somebody else in your area that you're competing with is not letting it sit, I mean, yeah, who's Google going to show? And that's what we look at all the time. Who is Google going to choose to serve up first? That's really the question everybody that does search engine optimization really asks. And yes, there's a content component, but more and more what I'm seeing, and I think you'd agree with me, Carter, the technical component is where most people are failing.
Yeah, it's hard. Mm-hmm. And it's only gotten harder. And, despite the fact that there are tools designed for making website creation easier, understanding all of the pieces that work with your SEO efforts is a bit of a challenge. And even though there's a blank there that's provided by your content management system to plug in alt text, doesn't always, and title text and caption and all of those factors around an image, doesn't mean that you're considering the overall SEO strategy for that page and how it fits into the whole website. So there's a lot of factors there that go into the strategy of using it well. But just know that more and more Google is saying, yeah, alt text is not so much about SEO as it is about accessibility. So use my best advice for how you know if you've got good alt text is whether or not it's descriptive of the image. Like, close your eyes, have somebody read to you the alt text. If you can picture in your mind what that image should look like, and then open up your eyes and see the image and go, yeah, that was a good description of that image, then you've got good alt text.
Yeah, I think that's great. Well, guys, for those of y'all that are here and stuck around, let me tell you, it should be worth it because the more you know, the more you understand about what goes on and who's doing what in your business, the better off you're going to be. And Spark Live can be found as a podcast on Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, or your favorite player. We'd love to get a couple more likes and loves. If you get those in today, that would be fantastic. If not, then we are going to go on to next week with another exciting SEO. Y'all are going to love this one. We're going to talk about EAT and YMYL websites and why they matter. Have any idea what EAT is, Carter? Do you remember?
Yeah, I do. YMYL, I'm not exactly sure what that means, but I have a guess.
Well, tell us what EAT is, and I can tell you what YMYL.
You're going to put me on the spot. Are we going to do it now, or you want to tell people?
I'm going to tell them what it is so they know to expect that, because we're going to talk EAT, expertise, authority,
And
trustworthiness.
trustworthiness, yeah.
That's it. That's the big one in SEO. So we're going to talk about expertise, authority, and trustworthiness. And then YMYL is your money or your life. That's what they call these sites, your money or your life. So it's like, you feel like you've been held up. Okay, give me your money or your life. All right. So Google actually has that described very, very particular websites. But it's important that you know what those are, because if you're taking credit cards and storing them anywhere, you need to know what a YMYL website is. So just saying, all this fun stuff we get into. See, everybody's like going, oh my gosh, I'm glad y'all do that and not me. So, hey everyone, thanks again for being here. Look forward to see you next week. Hopefully you guys have a fantastic Labor Day. Enjoy. We all have an extra day off coming up next Monday. I hope it's great. You get to cook out and have some good barbecue. And we'll be here same time next week, next same channel. I was going to say Bat Channel, but we can't use that because that's Batman. Oh well. We'll see you next week. Talk to you later.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.